Hello and welcome to Skeindeer Knits. My name is Ellie and I am a Norwegian living and knitting in London. And you can find me on Instagram as Skeindeer, and I am Skeindeer Knits as a designer on Ravelry. And don't forget the Ravelry group Skeindeer Knits, which is the best place to take part in my knit-alongs and giveaways, etc. Welcome! This is not a regular podcast episode, this is a Q&A special, yay! I don't know why I did the Italian thing, but that's should I do this over again? Nah, let's just get started. So I literally just posted on Instagram, hey, you got any questions for me? I just thought I'd do a Q&A. I'm recording very soon, so get me all those questions. So I'm just going to reply to questions as they come in, and yeah, we'll see what happens. They will be replied to in whatever order they come in, and I'm just like, there's just no system to the madness. So these are the questions that you guys have asked me, and without further ado, how do you have such lovely hair? Oh, thank you. I wash it. I'm gonna try not to spend too long talking about my hair on here, but I have a bit of a struggle. My hair is painfully straight and gets very easily oily, and I try to counteract it by any means necessarily. The necessary evil to that is that I need to allow myself to have one gross oily hair day per week that I just don't go out. But that does mean that I get a bunch of other lovely days of the week where my hair does look quite nice and fresh and not oily, and I can curl it, which is also a bonus. So I found, after 30 years on this planet, finally a way that I can give myself these lovely like vintage style locks. So the way I do that, I roll up my hair in these foam rollers, having covered my hair in this sort of styling foam. This just happens to be by Motions, but I'll always make sure to dry shampoo my fringe because it gets very oily very quickly. This is big sexy hair. And I also happen to have 3 hairbrushes that all do different things. Obviously this one is good for brushing my hair when it's wet, also very good for getting through these curls after I brush them through with this Bristol paddle brush thing by So Soon. I really like this brush. I wish I had it from the beginning. It looks kind of gross now, but it's nice because it's got the Bristol thing, but also has long spikes. We like that. It gets through thick curls. And I use this one to get through my fringe because of the dry shampoo. I want to get it out again, and it's got a lot of Bristol things as well. If anyone wants to know more about how to do your hair vintage style, I would suggest checking out the tutorials by Rachel Maxey, Karolina Zabrowska, and Jessica Kalgren-Fozard, because theirs are really good and have helped me find out how to do it my hair. I probably followed Rachel Maxey's foam roller tutorials the most. That's kind of why I use the same sort of mostly products that she uses and stuff, but I'm really not very good at hair, but I found that this method works. Only thing that's really important is that my hair is super dry before I put in the styling foam, and then I sleep with the foam rollers in my hair, and the next day I can brush it out and it looks like this. Then I'll pin them back up when I go to bed again, put like a wrap around it, and this can be curly for a whole week. So it stays, the curl stays, as long as I don't go out into any humidity, they do stay. So that's how I do the hair thing. Thank you. Now maybe there are some knitting questions now. How likely are you to design another hat? This is about knitting. Not just one hat, oh no. I am actually working on a collection of 6 hats. And I'm really gonna try to make them come out in lots of time before Christmas, because I do think maybe a lot of people would want to make those for, you know, holiday presents and stuff, because hats are quick. 2 of them are chunky, 3 of them are fingering weight, and 1 is DK, I think. I have knitted up 4 of them, I got 2 I need to knit up next. Then I need to photograph them, and then I need to have them tech edited and maybe see if I can get some of my usual test knitters to work on it, because I really don't have time to do another test knitter announcement or working with new test knitters. I just seriously, looking for test knitters can take 1 to 2 working days alone, and like assigning test knitting, there's a whole thing. Maybe people won't ask me test knitting questions on these Q&As, because maybe I should do a video on test knitting. That'd be something. But yes, there will be hat patterns coming from me. There will be 6. After you have your PhD, will you be going into another profession? Will you keep designing on the side or full time? Questions I ask myself a lot. I don't know. I could do Skeindeer Knits full time, so if I could, why wouldn't I? I really enjoy it. I am really fortunate during times like these. I can't believe how lucky I am, even though it is harder for me as it is for everyone. But it's I do also have now a very high academic qualification. It would be a shame not to use it. But that's also the sunk cost fallacy. Just because I have it doesn't mean I've lost anything by not using it. So I don't know if I could get a job that was related or relevant to the PhD that I would be really passionate about doing, where I would feel comfortable in. But yeah, I could just do Skeindeer knits, and I would very much like to do that. I guess my ideal situation would be to do Skeindeer knits alongside maybe 2 days a week other type of job, maybe 3 days a week. So I can't be like, oh yeah, I could work on that pattern today, but I can also do it tomorrow and the day after tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, because I have all day every day to Skeindeer knits. That's the danger. You need a bit of structure, and if I can get that from maybe a side job, or yeah, I don't know. That's the honest answer. I'm not looking for anything right now. Obviously things are all up in the air, so I don't have a good answer to that. What is your favorite / first design handbook for grading large size range? I don't know. I actually don't know if there are any book resources for a large size range in designing. I mostly rely on online resources like the Yarncraft Council's grading stuff that is available for free. I really like Isolde Teague's sizing grading spreadsheet that you can find simply by googling just that. The rest of it I know through experience as a knitter, to know what fits, how all that stuff works. It's something that comes through a lot of experience for me, not so much exact books. If anyone has suggestions for knitting books about grading for knitting in a size range that I would say should at least go from 30-inch bust to 60-inch bust, do pop them down below. I really don't have an answer to that either. Wow, this is going really well. How you doing? There are actually 2 comments here saying how am I doing. The next one's also saying, with COVID and a new flatmate and the cat, and did you knit more or less recently? I hope you're okay. So, fun fact about yours truly. I don't usually know what I'm feeling unless it's like a 0 and 1 or a 9 and a 10 on the scale. I don't feel emotions so strongly that I like go, I feel that most of the time I'm just like baseline, and I think I'm baseline right now, which isn't particularly great, but it's also not particularly not great. It's just I am without a lot of stressors that I've had in my life for the past few years. That is amazing. But also life is really heckin' boring right now. There's not much going on. I'm just kind of a little bit at peace, but it's a dull peace, so everyone watching is like, yeah, I relate to that. It's like, yeah. Yeah, so I don't know how I'm doing. Neither good nor bad. It just is. I think it's more good than bad. How about that? Okay, next question. How do you organize your stash? Will there ever be another MCAL for mittens? What's your favorite yarn? Okay, let's take these in turn. How I organize my stash. Well, this is sort of presuming that I do organize my stash. I do have my stash registered on Ravelry, which is really the only way that it is organized, because there you can sort by how much yarn you have, the date it was entered, the date you bought it, I think. You can sort it by color to make it look like a rainbow. I tend to sort it by amount, so I have the most amounts first, and I can choose projects based on the amount that I have. So like if I look at a pattern, it's like, oh, fingering weight 800 meters. Well, okay, let's scroll till we find 800 meters and see which of these are fingering weight. And you can also tick that as a box, so you only get the fingering weight results, although I tend to also tick then light fingering and sport, because like, you know, this is a very weird example. But yeah, I use that to kind of search my yarn stash, because the way it's organized in my shelf, it's not really. There is a box for Finul, there's a box for Hillesbog Lambswool, there's a box for Hillesbog Ask, there's a box for other Norwegian yarns. There is a box for thin yarns like Holst and such. There's a box for like special sweater quantities. Like, it's just a really weird system, but it's, you mostly, when you organize things physically, you just kind of have to think more about fitting it all in, you know, storage. But yes, even though it's not technically organized, I do use the IKEA Kallax shelf, and I have the fabric boxes that they don't come with the shelf, but they're made for the shelf, and they're really good. They have incredible capacity. I know a lot of knitters have that set, and as a Scandinavian I can only, you know, support that, I guess. Yeah, that is really helpful to me. I do pack all of my yarn in airtight vacuum bags, the kind that you don't roll over, so you can squeeze out all the air. I really like the Packmate bags for it. They cost a bit extra, but I find that more often than not they actually do keep the air out. Some of them break, but not as many as the other off-brand ones, so yeah, quite like those. That's the extent to which that is organized. Organized is a very strong word for what it is, but it's all compact, packed together, fits into one room, where I also, you know, have my own wardrobe, my own bed, my office, all my things, everything that isn't in the living room, obviously. And truthfully, I have a pretty good memory for things like that. Like, I will never forget what yarn I have and where it is. Never, maybe, okay, sometimes, but I tend to remember these things. Will there be another mystery cowl for the mittens? Well, I get asked so much that I guess I have to. I get questions about that all the time. People really seem to want a added mystery mitten pattern. I want to say yes, but actually haven't started designing it yet, and I can't obviously say guarantee there will be until I have done so. But I want to. If I get a good idea, I will do it, but obviously we're not going to do that until December, late November at the earliest. So I will, if I do, I will be doing the usual with sort of finer type yarns. You're going to probably have like a 64 stitch mitten-ish. I'm not going to steer too far away from the usual, but I hope to go a bit beyond the theme of the past 3 mitten designs that we've had, because they were kind of a trio that kind of had the same theme and atmosphere and feel, and I want to branch out from that now. Like, they are 3 that kind of go together, and now we're going to do something different. I just don't know what that will be yet, but I think, you know, different color scheme and a whole thing. Too soon to tell. Was the last question. What's your favorite yarn? You guys know this. Any sort of 2-ply, non-superwash, rustic, woolen spun yarn, like Finul, Ask, Vilja, Sword, Spindrift, 2-ply jumper weight, all super soft, JC Rennie, super soft lamb's wool, all of those, love them. Probably if I was gonna narrow it down, I'd probably say Vilja and Finul, maybe. Someone just asked hats. Yes, hats. Have you ever considered getting into spinning yarn? No. Which is weird. You'd think someone like me would really like that. You'd think I'd be really into that idea and really want to try it. I don't. I don't know why. Maybe I'm worried that it would take away from my knitting time, but I do want to sew and I do want to knit with knitting machines. I do want to do other crafts, but I don't want to spin. Even though I am really interested in how yarn is spun, how it's composed, all its quality, this whole idea of grist, which I'm still getting my head around. I just don't want to make the yarn myself. I very rarely look at a hand-spun yarn and think, oh yeah, I want that. I don't. I just don't want the product. I have other things I want to do. I am in awe of people who do spin their own yarn. I'm like, but it's just not for me. I mean, maybe in a year from now I'll have my own spinning wheel and I'll be like, past Ellie, silly girl. But for now, I don't feel like spinning at all. It's just not on the list. Favorite super stretchy cast on? You know, I used to be really into trying all the different cast on methods and bind off methods and all the increase and decrease methods. I was just like, I want to try them all. I got a good kick out of that. And then now I'm like, you know what? The old Norwegian cast on is good enough, and I use it on pretty much everything unless I need a particular cast on, like, you know, for toe-up socks and things like that. But yeah, old Norwegian cast on, also known as the German twisted cast on. I never go wrong with that. It's stretchy, it's firm, it gathers, it's springy. Like, I like it. It's just, I don't fix what's not broken. When will there be a pattern from the beautiful red cardigan with lace, kind of like Host? I'm assuming you are talking about the Skeindeer cardigan, which is what I've named it. And depending on when this Q&A is going to come out, it may already have come out because it's really just around the corner at the time of recording this. It's just around the corner. There will be a pattern. I can't exactly say when, but it will be in October, end of October. Whenever you see this, people of the future, October, it will be called Skeindeer, and I'm really, really pleased with it. All the plans I had for it worked out. It fits beautifully. I'm really just, You will hear more about that if you haven't already. Hope you are well and safe. Are you planning a trip to see the baby soon? How difficult is it to start designing patterns? Wow, these questions are not related. Okay. No, I don't think I can go see my nephew who was just born because of coronavirus. Because I can't justify it. Like, yes, I could technically book tickets and probably be able to go. And I even would have a place to do my 2-week quarantine, which would be miserable in the dark of December in Norway. I just can't justify traveling when things are the way they are, because I live in the most coronavirus borough of London. We are one of the worst. So if I don't catch it by then, I certainly increase the chance of catching it during travel, during Christmas, when more people travel than ever, and even when it's not a pandemic, people are very likely to catch things like the flu or the cold during travel during Christmas. So who's to say I won't catch COVID and bring that over to my hometown, to my old grandma, to my young nephew? I don't want to do that. So I'm already living in a high-risk area, traveling at a high-risk time, and by high risk means I can't justify it. I really can't. I would love to, but you know, the time will come. I will get to see him maybe half a year from now. I hope so. It just might not be Christmas. It would be very selfish of me if I did that, given the way things are now, but hey, the future may change and there may be some reasons why I could reasonably justify it. It's just right now I don't know. How difficult is it to start designing patterns? You don't really know how to do it unless you've done it, so it's gonna be difficult the first time you do something you do for the first time. So yeah, it is difficult, and I wouldn't have been able to do it at all if it weren't for the number of knitting projects I have worked on the past decade. And I wouldn't really be able to do it if it weren't for how many projects I've been working on since I picked up knitting again when I was 19. You really do need a lot of knitting experience if you don't have a particular educational background in garment design, in some form of maybe sewing, tailoring, costume making, anything, which I don't have, and a lot of us designers do not have. We come from a knitting background, from a hobby background, and then we learn from knitting clothes to ourselves and adapting them and seeing which different things work and don't work, and building up this skill set in our minds and in our hands that eventually build up to something that we can use when we want to design. And then the first time we design something, maybe it's not the best thing, but then we get to do over and do it again and again. I mean, I had a number of attempts at designing my first proper pattern, which was the saddle mittens. I first knitted them and they were too long, so I had to frog them, do them again, and they ended up being the right length. I then wrote them up for a testing class, which was rewritten again for the proper class, and then was rewritten again for a publication. Then I rewrote it again because I was better writing patterns. Then I rewrote it again because I had a better template. And you know what, I think I might spice it up again in not too long, because I do become better and better, and I look back at the skill set I had when I started and it just wasn't, you know, as good as it could be. But that didn't stop me from starting, because I still had that knitting skill set of being a knitter for years. But you also need this experience of being a designer, which doesn't necessarily come with the experience of being a knitter. That only comes from designing, and you need to be able to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes to progress and improve your skill set. That's the very long, convoluted answer to, what was the question? How difficult is it to start designing patterns? It is difficult until you have done it, and then you find it easy because you've done it. I don't know if that's the answer you wanted, but that's the answer I've got for you. So how do you afford all your yarn? Okay, so this is a question you probably want to be careful about asking other people, because some people do get very miffed about that, but I'm going to answer it anyway because I'm not a very miffed person. Wording. I don't think I buy as much yarn as people think. I think when we watch podcasts and you see everyone's bought yarn, in our minds we add all that yarn together and we go, oh, podcasters buy so much yarn. And then it's like, yeah, but each and every one of them probably don't. But I do recognise that I buy more yarn now than I did when I had a lower income. I also buy a lot less yarn this year because I don't go to tempting places like yarn shops and festivals. So I can see, like, compared to other people, like, yeah, I probably do buy a lot of yarn. How I afford it? Well, I don't drink much, I don't go out, I I pretty much don't drink at all. Like, I don't have expensive habits and other things I do. I don't spend my money much on other things. It's knitting, it's rent, it's food. You know? So what else am I going to spend it on if I have some disposable income? And I also don't buy very expensive yarn, which you may have noticed. I really do think twice of buying yarn that costs more than £10 per 100 grams, which I think a lot of people do spend a lot more than that per 100 grams. Most of my yarn is like £3 to £4 per 50 gram ball. It's not very expensive. If all my stash was, you know, the most exquisite of hand-dyed luxury yarns, then wow, I would wonder how I would afford that. But my stash isn't. It's a lot of bulk buying, very affordable yarns. It's several coats of whole super soft, which I paid probably 20 to 30 pounds for half a kilo to a kilo. And the meterage of that yarn is crazy. So that's how I afford it. I like affordable yarns, and I think a lot of them are really good. And how do you knit so much? Love the podcast and your designs. Thank you. How do I knit so much? Again, some people feel miffed about questions like that as well, which I don't really understand. I guess, you know, we're all, as knitters, we are like used to hearing from people that like, oh, I would never have time to knit as much as you do. If you have that question, I've had that question. It's not a question. And it feels like people think that you just like have all this like disposable time that they don't have when they sit straight up and down and watch TV not doing anything. I'm like, I just fit knitting into my life. If I'm on the tube, I knit. If I'm honestly out walking, I will bring some stockinette with me. I went through a whole protest like a year or two ago, and I was knitting on the sleeves of my Tenya sweater. You know, things you can do. I do sit a lot on my bum and knit, especially during lockdown. I don't think anyone's wondering how I have all this knitting time, because what else am I supposed to do? I've been working up this sweater thing that I've done like 3 out of 5 skeins already in just a couple of days. Can't wait to show you. It's knitting up like a storm. Yeah, I guess the easy answer is that I just really like to knit, and I will want to spend time doing it, so I do it. I think it's the same way that people who love gardening do so much gardening. They love doing it. People love reading. They love it so much. They will be wanting to do it all the time. I don't ever have to look for knitting time because I'm just naturally inclined to knit. I'm not shy about bringing out my knitting if I'm out with friends. I even bring it out when I'm like in the boardroom at university. People can say what they want. I really don't care. It's a conversation starter, if anything. When I'm sitting, I'm knitting, and sometimes I don't even sit. But thanks for the lovely comment. Next, is there anything you'd like to knit or design, but you're intimidated by it? No, I don't feel intimidated by knitting. But there's a lot of things I just don't want to do because I don't like the process. So like, if I think, oh, that's just going to take forever. If it's like 2.5 millimeter needle color work in Tarja cardigan, I'm like, oh, I'm just not going to enjoy a single second of that process. I know people who would love that. I know I wouldn't. I'm not intimidated by it. I just know that that is something I am very unlikely to finish. So that's more what makes me not want to do something than being intimidated. Having said that, designer-wise, there have been things I have put off designing because I wanted to wait until I had more experience as a designer to tackle it. Like, I've been working on this cardigan that I'm actually gonna release hopefully this year. It's top down. It has borrowing some short row sections from the ziggurat to make it kind of contiguous, 2 fronts and the back with short rows to race and shape for satin sleeve. And then you work sticks for the armholes and for the front and for the cardigan front, and like there's color work sections, and it's like cropped, but you can do it full length. It's these stripes, there's a whole, like, there's just so many factors involved. I was really kind of, I guess, intimidated to really work all that up and make it, you know, an intuitive pattern write-up that people will enjoy following. And I have written up my 2nd or 3rd version of that now, and I think it's finally good to go. I had to put some modification advice in the appendix so that it will work out for people who get different row gauge, but apart from that, I'm like, it's good, it's ready, finally. Yeah, that's a one that I guess I was arguably intimidated to really put out there, but I think having done it twice over, I think it's now pretty good. And that's often what I end up doing, is I learn from doing it once and then I rewrite it, and then I've sort of used that experience to make a good pattern that I think others will enjoy following. Photography tips for your knitting projects. Daylight. You don't need fancy light equipment, you need daylight, not sunlight, daylight. A cloudy day is the best day, or just find a place in the shade. Today would be amazing. It's a bit partially clouded, which isn't ideal, but if it's clouded, you have the perfect light. I mean, look at the light I'm dealing with today. It's all daylight. The sun is just behind the building now, so I can get, best light conditions. And that's really all you want, because artificial light will inevitably lead to you to struggle with what is called white balance. And white balance is the thing that sort of decides, I guess, to what extent is your photo yellow or blue. You can sort of put in a sliding scale, and that is very difficult to get right when you use artificial light. Even if you correct for it, it will always look a little bit in my opinion. So just daylight. And when you have daylight, you can use your camera phone and it will look good. If I'm going to take a good indoor photo, I need a really good camera to do that. Luckily I have this beautiful camera here that does add a bit of, that blurred background and a little bit of depth and strong colours, which is undeniably helpful. But I'm telling you, if you take a photo with your phone camera or a compact camera in daylight, you can add a bit of depth and strong colours in like the Instagram editor or Visco, or if you have like a free or paid for photo editing software. I'm not going to say that you need to have the fancy schmancy camera that I have, even though I do love having that camera. I did design for probably 3 years before I bought that camera, and I knitted for probably 9 years before I bought it, and I did still produce good photos of those projects. So it's not about the camera, it's about the light, I would argue. Other things, get a bit of depth, don't just photograph it straight up and down, don't put it just flat and just leave it at that. Wear it, and if you are nervous about being photographed yourself, and that tends to show on our faces, you don't have to include your face if you look uncomfortable in front of the camera. A lot of people do beautiful photos just kind of neck down, them wearing the garment. You can see how well it fits, and I think that is hugely important for people who look like you. So yeah, wear it. What first inspired you to start a knitting podcast? Other knitting podcasts? Because I'd wanted to do a knitting channel since I discovered BookTube, and I started doing BookTube videos, and I was like, I want to do knitting content, but I haven't seen anyone do the equivalent for knitting. So it really took me seeing other knitters making knitting videos that was more than just a instructional video, that was more of an inspirational chatty video that felt really nice to just have on while knitting. But what I was lacking was seeing anyone knit what I was knitting. A lot of people were knitting with hand-dyed yarn, which there's nothing wrong with, but it just wasn't what I was using. And I wanted to show people that you can knit with just solid coloured, affordable yarn. It's not really the yarn that makes the project, it's the knitter. I was also knitting different things. I got my patterns from different places at the time. I wasn't really knitting from indie patterns so much then as I do now. I now actually much prefer indie patterns. So I essentially wanted to see the sort of knitter that I am represented in that podcast format that I had really started to enjoy watching. I guess I kind of wanted to bring my type of knitting into that format. So that was what inspired me, I think, and that's probably also why I did become, I guess, I hesitate to say like popular, it's not a word I use about myself, but like why it worked out and I gained a bit of momentum doing so, because I think when you just look at what other people do and you go, oh, I want to do that too, it's like, okay, you're inspired, but you're not really, it's sort of been done. And when something's been done, doing the same thing doesn't give you the same result as the people who did it before you, because it's been done. You have to do something new. And that new thing can often just be combining two existing things, which is, I guess, what I did. I combined my Norwegian knitting background, which existed, with the sort of indie knitting scene podcast world, which also existed, and the two things together became something new. And I think that's probably why it worked out. I know you have probably said, I don't remember, but when did you start knitting and who taught you? It's honestly a very boring answer. It's the same answer that every Norwegian's going to give you, and that is that it's part of the curriculum, and that people always react in a way that I think is a bit weird to that. They're always like, wow, you learn how to knit in Norway, wow, cool. And I'm like, I do think it's a really good thing, and I hope they never stop. But it's like, okay, but you also learn algebra at school. You also learn, you have cooking classes, and like, it doesn't mean that you continue doing it, you know. And to me, that was school. It wasn't something I did. It had nothing to do with me and how I viewed myself. It was something that we did at schools, even though I guess enjoyed the process and stuff. I didn't do it unless school told me to, with one exception. So I wouldn't count that. I count when I was 19 and lived at a school that was far away from home, and me and everyone else at that school were bored out of our brains because it was such a remote place that we couldn't get outside of the school building even without this whole, you know, ordering taxis in the countryside and this whole thing. So we decided to go and get ourselves some yarn and start knitting. And it was really just being in that environment where a lot of people collectively decided, yeah, we're gonna knit. That's how we're gonna spend our time. And it sort of became this thing. School eventually took note of this and hired in a knitter from the neighboring town, and she brought in her like kind of stash leftovers and some patterns of hers that she was free to distribute for us, and it became like a knitting group. My first kind of knit night, if you will. Which of your sweater patterns is more beginner friendly? Okay, I'm gonna try not to sound too, which is probably not gonna work out, but I have a lot to say about this sort of question that I do hear and see a lot, which is something along the lines of, is this beginner friendly? Is this easy? Can I knit this? You know, all sorts of things like that, that I'm more and more becoming kind of resistant to that question, because it's a question that is impossible to answer, but it sort of says a lot about the person asking in their, I think, knitting confidence. And obviously knitting confidence comes from experience, so I'm going to assume it has a little bit to do with that as well. And I find it difficult to answer, because I would say, yeah, all my knitting garments are beginner friendly because everything is explained to you, and what isn't explained to you, I have reference to something that explains it better than I can, like a tutorial video. And I really want that to be absolutely clear to people. Like, when you buy from indie designers, most of the time everything will be either explained to you or at least referenced to, so that you know how to find the answers. Now, having said that, there are certain implicit assumptions in a knitting pattern, in any knitting pattern, beginner friendly or not. And I mean, I am making a video series addressing those things, so hopefully along with that you could potentially knit any garment patterns. But having said that, I do recognize that there are some things that are more beginner friendly than others. Like, I can see why someone would start off with a flax sweater by Tin Can Knits before tackling Alice Starmore garments. You know, that makes sense. So I think it's helpful, if you're looking for beginner friendly, is to specify exactly what qualities that you are looking for. What are you interested in? Do you mean a sweater that is just stockinette and has no other bells and whistles to it, that you can just focus on constructing the garment and nothing else? If that's what you mean, yeah, I would mention flax. Why not? But my first sweater was a cable sweater that I knitted simultaneously with a colourwork dress that I made up myself as I went. What is beginner friendly? Why do you need it to be beginner friendly? Why do you think you need that? Why do you, you know, I generally wish that people would just believe that they can do whatever, because they know how to cast on, they know how to knit, they know how to purl, they know how to bind off, and everything else will be referenced and explained in the pattern, any abbreviation, everything. So I think the thing you probably want to do the most is to look for designers that have a good reputation for well-explained patterns. That's probably what you really want, I would guess. But that's not really answering your question. I just went on a bit of a rant where I just wish that that was a question that either is more specific or isn't a thing, because you can do it. I just want to gently, carefully, but intensely shake people and say, you can do it. You can do it. But to answer your question, which of my sweater patterns are beginner friendly? Pure Fuzz is stockinette. Floof is stockinette. If you're looking for stockinette, they are stockinette. Winterfjell explains a lot of things that Norwegian traditional kind of commercial sweater patterns don't. So it's sort of a kind of, you could take that sweater and learn a lot about how to increase evenly in a way that if you were going to just knit from a commercial company in Norway wouldn't tell you. Also, it flips it top down instead of being bottom up. So I think from, what I've heard from what people have told me who have knitted the pattern, is that pattern really, really elevates people's knitting skills and confidence a great deal. So I could also recommend Winterfjell, even though Winterfjell is a very sort of choose your own adventure sweater, which I know some people would definitely say is not beginner friendly, but I disagree, because I think beginners are like blank slates with all the potential, and that I said what I said. How do you decide which project to work on? Do you work on a certain project in certain locations? Do you have a set schedule / rotation for what you work on? Do you just pick up whatever is closest or whatever is calling to you? Do you work on the same project for most of the day, or do you typically switch project after a certain amount of time? I love that you think that there's a method to this madness. Thank you. That's nice that you think that. There's not. There's absolutely no system. I am the kind of person who thrive on systems, rules, routines and structure, and is completely, utterly unable to establish any of the above. So and what may surprise you is that I'm actually quite a monogamous knitter. Yeah, I have between 50 and 60 ongoing projects. That's not very monogamous. But I only knit on one for a good stretch of time. Like for the past almost week, I have only worked on this one sweater. So that's kind of how I work. I hyper focus on this one thing, get to about 50% through and put it away and do something else. Which explains a lot. So I kind of, go super monogamous until I'm like, I can't anymore with this. I need something different. And that is where I need to kind of catch myself and pick up something I've already started instead of starting something else again. And now that I'm focusing a bit more on finished items on the podcast rather than the continuous process, I think there will be more of that. I think it's gonna push me a bit towards that and give me that incentive to finish, because I haven't really had that incentive for a while. What I've been doing is mostly knitting on this thing really passionately, getting to a really long bit of it. Oh, the day has come to record a podcast. I show it off and well, then it's done. I have knitted it, I've shown it off. It's not done, but at least it's been on the podcast. There's been content to tick the box, and I don't finish, and that's not good. So I now keep the project a little bit more to myself until they are finished, and then I share the whole process. I think that works out really well. I'm not going to do it with all the projects because there's a lot of projects you've already seen, so there's no harm in showing you them even more. But I'm trying to make myself a little bit more systematic, because I am not at the moment, to answer your question. There is no method to the madness. There is absolutely no system. I sit and knit on something until I am so fed up I want to do something else. I would love to hear you talk about your design process from first idea to publication. Okay, I'm gonna try to summarize it here, but if any of you are interested in me elaborating on this question, or any of the previous questions for that matter, into a devoted video for that topic, let me know in the comments below, because this could be a video. I'm gonna try to answer it, because it's, again, I don't always know what's going on. I just know it happens and I go with it. So when I have when I'm gonna start designing something, I get an idea. I have an image in my head and I do the thing. I don't know where the image comes from, but it's a thing. It's sort of hazy, but it's there, and I sort of try to get closer to it. And the idea may have popped up from any sort of contextual thing, like maybe a sweater quantity of yarn that I came across, or maybe there's something that my wardrobe needs. I honestly don't know where that initial spark of inspiration comes from. I don't know. It's just an image in my head that I sort of know how I want to look. And so I then start thinking about the yarn I want to use. That comes very early. And knowing that yarn pretty well, I already know what gauge suits it best. So I immediately then start plotting the gauge into a spreadsheet, and I start deciding what the size range is going to be. I used to go like full force, like 16 sizes, to have like very small differences between each size, with a very broad size range from like 30-ish inch bars to 60-ish inch bars, give or take an inch, right, for both of them. Depending if positive or negative ease. Obviously I will add that to it as well. So I will always like grade with those busts in mind, and then I will add ease to that, and that will like be the final size of the garment, not the person. Ease means, you know, if it's positive ease, you add it to it. If it's negative ease, which I don't tend to use, you subtract. And if it's zero ease, you don't make any difference. It's the same measurement as the recipient. So now I have the whole size range. I start plotting in numbers for the given construction I want to use. I have a couple of ones that I just know how to do at this point, like yokes, like saddle shoulder raglan, satin sleeve in at least like 2-3 different ways at this point. There's contiguous, there is the kind of bottom of contiguous I've been doing. There is the one with the short row kind of sleeve cap. So just like depending on the construction method that I obviously will know from the beginning, I will put those numbers in, and I start thinking like which stitch count it adds up to. Maybe I already have a chart I want to use. I'll have to obviously choose the size range based on how many times that adds up, and it's like a whole thing. There's a lot of numbers. I start off with the numbers and the image in my head and make sure that they all fit together, so that this idea in my mind is going to work for all the sizes, and I want to know that for sure before a single stitch has been cast on. So once the spreadsheet is close to complete, although sometimes I like put off the sleeves or something like that until I started knitting it, and then I start knitting my size, that's where things are a little bit hazy, because again, I don't control my knitting mojo. So I may not finish as quickly as I think. I may think that this is going to be done for this season, and then it ends up being ready for the next season, and that can just happen because I don't want to push myself too hard when it comes to the actual knitting, not just for like, you know, repetitive strain injury and the fact that it takes a long time, but that's the risk when you make your hobby your work, is when you start doing things like that and imposing deadlines and become very like, so I'm very careful about that, so that this is still my passion that drives my whole work and I still want to do this. Resultingly, I do also have a lot of designs going at once, because if I don't finish one, well, there's still all these other ones that could be finished, and usually will be some of them. And then usually while I am still knitting on them, I will start sending them out to test knitters. I sometimes do a test knit call on Instagram, and sometimes I choose some regular ones. It sort of depends what I want from the test knit, and also depends on like where I'm at with the sizes and how comfortable I am with that. Usually I am pretty confident if it's something I've done similar to before. And of course I use a tech editor, so that is something I have come to see as essential as a knitting pattern designer. Now there are lots of people are very different here. Some have kind of in-house tech editors as a designer team. I'm obviously not a team, so I outsource to a regular tech editor, and some people are actually, weirdly enough, able to do it themselves, but that is a very much an exception to the rule. Usually you do need a second pair of eyes on your design and your write-up. It's, you know, like when you wrote an essay for university and you just read it so many times you don't see the blatantly obvious errors anymore, and that's the sort of thing. So the tech editor looks through like spelling mistakes and obviously numerical mistakes, mathematical inconsistencies, all of those things. So as you can see, my process of designing and the idea is very closely linked to the numerical aspects of the grading, of the write-up, of the knitting. They're all intertwined, and I have to have a multiple sort of skill set for them all to work out. And that also includes yeah, knitting skills, Excel skills, spreadsheet skills, grading skills, InDesign, which is where I write up my patterns, photography, you have to do a lot of things. And yeah, so by the time the garment is finished and blocked, I will take the time to go out with my tripod and a remote, and I do photograph myself with this camera on the tripod there, it's on right now. And then I kind of have the PDF ready. I tend to put the photos in as I'm interacting with my tech editor, and my test knitters will have finished at this point. We tend to kind of finish around the same time because they are quicker than me, because they work on like one thing while I work on several. So we usually just like converge at this point, and that's when we're starting to look at a release date. So that's usually the reason I don't know when I release things until I have released them. That's my process. I could do a full video on this where I'm actually planning what I'm saying and it sounds a little bit more coherent if you want that, This is an interesting question too. How do you market your patterns and podcast strategies? I was really confused by that when I began podcasting. I was like, is there like a database? Is there like a list? Is there somewhere you can like say, hey, I have a podcast? And I honestly couldn't figure it out. I even asked some existing podcasters, which I'm sure they thought I was a total numb for asking, and I probably was. I found it really confusing. I didn't understand how to be discovered, but often just having called yourself a knitting podcast puts you kind of a little bit in the algorithm and in the recommendation for people who watch other podcasts. It's just weird YouTube magic. Because I had people just eventually just coming across my podcast and finding it, even though I didn't really promote it anywhere. I just made it for the void and people found it and liked it and passed on the word. So I think you want to rely more on people just giving you spontaneous shout outs, everyday knitters. I think it's a mistake to think that established podcasters are going to be the ones to decide whether you get to start podcasting and get an audience as well. Sure, a shout out helps, but it wouldn't actually be something I would rely on from personal experience. As much as those shout outs are incredible, the biggest impact to get you an audience is actually what happens through word of mouth, that you can't control, but it is a reflection of what you put out there. It does mean you having to put out things out there before any of those things come back to you, and that feels weird. Like for the first 5-10 episodes of mine, it felt weird to make content for nobody. And the other stupid thing is that I have this video in one of my first earlier ones that I said it's weird for me to make these videos because few if anyone's watching, and it's but I just keep doing it. I remember I said something like that, and people are still leaving comments on that today saying, what are you talking about? You have 17,000 subscribers. I'm like, could you just read the date of the video? That was a rant I didn't expect to make. As far as marketing patterns, I actually think less is more, which I don't think about most things in life. I like clutter. I like to put up things somewhere. More is more. That's my. But when it comes to marketing, there's a danger of thinking of your platform as a purely marketing platform, even though it is, because people don't like being sold stuff to all the time. They want to feel a little bit more enjoyment from your platform than just, hey, I've got more things for you to throw money at. That's nobody likes that. I don't think. We want to feel like there is more to it than just being sold to. So if you market yourself intensely, I find myself that I don't respond well to that, and I end up disengaging from the content. So I just naturally don't do that. I will say once, maybe twice, that I have a new pattern. I will announce it in one podcast episode, and I will thank people for having bought it in the next. And that's kind of what I do. And maybe maybe I could do it more, but now I obviously do make a separate video, which I hesitated to do for a while, but now I actually think they're quite fun. I think people get to see more of the pattern that way, and it's actually something that is a positive for the audience, not just myself. I'm quite I hold back a bit in how much I market, which I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me about that, but I personally believe that people don't need to be told the same thing over and over. I just don't believe that. That was a lot of words to say that. Less is more. I advertise a new pattern once or twice on each platform, and maybe I should do it more, but I don't. know that you are not quite ready yet, but do you plan to make your patterns available other than on Ravelry? I love your patterns but can't use Ravelry. Yeah, so yeah, I'm not able to do it as quickly as I would like, but yes, that is the plan. For people who have accessibility issues, I understand the frustration that I can't offer my patterns elsewhere right now. I hear you. Like, I know this isn't like really addressing the issue, but I do highly want to recommend Evanita's style sheet that you can install before even going on Ravelry, and then you can go to Ravelry and see it already activated and it's safe. If it addresses your issues with it, like, that is something I can recommend. But if that's like regardless not something you're interested in, that is a plan. I am gonna set up my own website. I think it's silly of me to put all my eggs in one Ravelry basket, so I'm not actually working on that because I need something in place before I start working on it, which is incredibly frustrating. I was hoping this would be done by maybe next month, but now it looks like it's gonna take a bit longer. All I can tell you is it's gonna happen. It was gonna happen regardless. I am obviously speeding it a bit ahead now than I thought I would initially, and I also need to learn a lot of things in order to do that, because that's the thing with being a designer. You need to really have a vast array of skill set, and I think that means me resurrecting my old web design coding skills, which are very deeply hidden under a lot of new knitting knowledge. I hope that addressed the question. I know it's like super vague and that's annoying. How do you keep track of what row you're on? Counting? Pen and paper? Row counter too? I read my knitting, and I would highly encourage that as a skill for like everyone who don't currently know what that even means. Like being able to look at your knitting and just with your finger kind of go 1, 2, 3, 4 and just counting your rows. I do that. I can see where the last increase is and I just count up. That's what I do. I don't make notes. I don't row counter, nothing. I can just see it on my knitting. Even if the yarn is fuzzy. And once you know that, I'm telling you, you're just gonna have this like revelation. It's great. Though having said that, cables, it's just, I need to make like a serious number of notes for cables. That's throws it all out of whack. I can't read cables. I'm like, did that happen on last round or the one before? Who knows? This is why people wear cables flat, because then you know. And that is all the questions that I got whilst recording this. I'm sure more questions will come in during the day, because I gave people like just 2 hours to, you know, ask their questions. So I'm sure there's still going to be lots of them coming in. So I may do a part 2 to this video, and yeah, we might do this again. And also, do please let me know in the comments if there's any of these questions that you would like to hear a dedicated, slightly more planned out, scripted video for, if there's a topic that interests you. This is a bit rambly, obviously, but this is more like, you know, bonus content, a bit of a garnish on the new Skeindeer knits comeback. I don't know. Bye.